Whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, a Trump supporter or a Biden supporter, or no supporter at all, we can all pretty much agree on one thing, and that is that the 2020 presidential debate was a shit show. But this was one of the most chaotic debates in US history. I'm your host, Mina Naidine, and here's what went down. Both of the candidates were asked various questions, from the Supreme Court to healthcare to COVID-19 to the economy to race to climate change to voting integrity, and most importantly, why should we, the American people, be voting for you? Before I get into the ins and outs of each one of these topics, I need to make one thing clear, and that is that there was a lot of straying away from the issues at hand. Instead of discussing the issues piece by piece, there was a lot of interrupting, a lot of blaming, and I have a very important word for you guys right now: ad hominem. Now, what does ad hominem mean? Ad hominem is the fallacious argumentative strategy that avoids genuine discussion of the topic by instead attacking the character, motive, and so on of the person associated with that argument. It's the equivalent of saying, "Yo mama," when someone is trying to tell you something. Like, you're literally avoiding everything that you're supposed to talk about by talking about the person's character instead, which has no relevance to whether or not they're able to lead the country. So instead of talking about the issue, you're saying, "Hey, you're not very smart. Hey, you graduated the lowest in your class. What about your son who was addicted to drugs? Oh, what about losing the far left? You're going to lose the far left." The constant interrupting, throwing your opponent off the game, that is not fair play. In some ways, you can argue that it is far from even being unpresidential. You are breaking the rules that you agreed to in the very beginning, that each person would have 2 minutes to answer their question uninterrupted. That affects not only the outcome of the debate, but it affects what we, the audience, have to learn about what your stances are about the issues themselves. We're not focusing on the issues. At this point, we're focusing on the delivery, we're focusing on the attacks, and it was just such a huge disappointment. I'm at a loss for words right now.
President Trump, you nominated Amy Coney Barrett over the weekend to succeed the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the court. You say the Constitution is clear about your obligation and the Senate's to consider a nominee to the court. Vice President Biden, you say that this is an effort by the president and Republicans to jam through an appointment and what you call an abuse of power. My first question to both of you tonight: why are you right in the argument you make and your opponent wrong? And where do you think a Justice Barrett would take the court? President Trump, in this first segment, you go first. 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chris. I will tell you very simply, we won the election. Elections have consequences. We have the Senate, we have the White House, and we have a phenomenal nominee, respected by all, top academic, good in every way, In fact, some of her biggest endorsers are very liberal people from Notre Dame and other places. So I think she's going to be fantastic. We have plenty of time, even if we did it after the election itself. I have a lot of time after the election, as you know. So I think that she will be outstanding. She's going to be as good as anybody that has served on that court. We really feel that. We have a professor at Notre Dame, highly respected by all, said she's the single greatest student he's ever had. He's been a professor for a long time at a great school. And we won the election, and therefore we have the right to choose her. And very few people knowingly would say otherwise. And by the way, the Democrats, they wouldn't even think about not doing it. If they had, the only difference is they'd try and do it faster. There's no way they would give it up. They had Merrick Garland, but the problem is they didn't have the election, so they were stopped. And
this is a really tumultuous time in human history because Trump has the ability to appoint someone new and rush into things before America is ready to decide what we're going to do. My deepest sympathies go to Chris Wallace, who was the moderator of this entire debate. Chris, I'm so sorry you had to deal with this. As a fellow host and reporter and moderator, I don't know what I would have done in that situation. That would have been a very tough debate to moderate because neither party was respecting the rules, but obviously there was a disproportionate amount of interruptions coming from Trump than there was from Biden. Trump was instigating a lot, he was interrupting, he wasn't respecting the rules, and he was getting really aggressive with the moderator himself. He was also making a lot of inappropriate comments and puns and jabs about him knowing how to finish, whatever that means. Ill, gross, I don't want to think about it. And he failed to denounce white supremacy. And when I say he failed to denounce it, I mean that he was literally asked, what do you have to say about white supremacy? Do you denounce it? And instead of just coming out and saying, yes, I denounce white supremacy, he said, wait, what do you mean? He was stuttering, he didn't know what to say. And this is what he said, you guys.
Proud Boys, stand back and stand by. But I'll tell you what, somebody's got to do something about Antifa and the left, because this is not a right-wing problem. This is a left-wing. This is a left-wing problem.
White supremacists.
Proud Boys, stand back and stand by. For those of you who don't know, the Proud Boys are a far-right white supremacist organization, and he just reignited his fan base. He knew that denouncing white supremacy would cost him the election because that is a huge chunk of his voters. That is his base. White supremacists are his base. So when it comes to this debate, people care about race. People care about the pandemic. People care about the economy. But all of these things are intertwined in how we live our day-to-day lives. They're not mutually exclusive. It's hard to care about one thing and not care about the other because each thing affects the other. Who's appointed to the Supreme Court affects the decisions that are made in our lives, in government. Healthcare affects our day-to-day. If it doesn't affect us, it affects the lives of someone that we love. COVID-19 affects all of us. Even if some of us are doing better than others, it still affects us. The economy is huge. That's a given. That obviously affects every American. Race affects us all. Even if you're white, your brothers and sisters are being affected by the candidate's stance on Black Lives Matter, on immigration, and countless other issues. Keep in mind that Trump was the one who initiated the Muslim ban, and there's just a lot of crap going down right now. A lot of, vague promises about how to move on for the future. I need clarity. I need some clear answers. I don't think we, the American public, got an answer. And based on each of these presidential candidates' stances on the issues, I can't even say that there was a clear winner in this debate, but I can say that there was a clear loser. And before I say who, I'm going to let you guys decide for yourselves based on everything that went down. He wants to get rid of the entire thing, start from scratch, new plan that's even better and greater than Obamacare that people are going to be happy with. Now, how is he going to do this? We don't know. They never really talked about the details of their healthcare plan, and it was brought to the public's attention that Trump has been in office for 3.5 years, and there have been no recent steps in terms of moving forward with a healthcare plan. We still have this same thing going on, and Trump's promises have not been delivered. So what's going on with healthcare? We don't know, but now, especially during a global pandemic, healthcare is critical more than it has ever been. This is huge. Let's talk about COVID-19 because this pandemic has been going on since the beginning of the year. This is insane. Our lives have been so different since March. And I don't know when we're going to be able to return to what is considered normal. The question that Chris Wallace asked the two presidential candidates is, based on what you have said and done and what you said you would do, why should the American people trust you to deal with the crisis? So Biden opened up this entire statement by just going over the facts and what Trump has done, and Trump had a chance to defend himself and explain further. Biden stated the facts that there are 200,000 Americans dead, 7 million who are infected in the United States, and 20% of the deaths in the entire world is in America. The United States of America is responsible for 20% of the entire deaths in the world. That is a huge number. 20% is a crazy number. That means out of every 100 people in the world, 20 people are dead in America. That's crazy. That's representing a huge percentage of the world's population. 750 to 1,000 people a day are dying. Crazy number. I don't know if you can fathom that number. And Biden decided to quote Trump, who actually said, when asked about coronavirus and the pandemic and the lives that have been lost, Trump stated, "It is what it is because you are who you are." Biden made sure to really hammer that point in. And additionally, he really, told the American public, Trump knew about coronavirus back in February, and instead of really addressing the situation and figuring out what was going on, he said that everything was going to be okay because he didn't want the American people to panic. But now everybody's panicking, and everybody seems to be really worried about what is going to go on with COVID-19, with healthcare, with this entire system. Biden's mission objective, according to his words, are to fund what needs to be done now in order to save lives. What is Trump's response to all of this? His response is that yes, people have died, but way more people would have died under Biden. He says that millions of people would have died under Biden, and there are no straight counts and accurate numbers of who died in other countries, and that those countries are not going to reveal accurate numbers. And though that may be true, that really takes away from the situation that we're talking about right now, which is what are we going to do about coronavirus here in the United States? Let's not even worry about other countries or how we're comparing ourselves to the numbers in other countries. This shouldn't be happening, period. And yes, we understand if this got out of control or it just happened, but there were so many things that could have been done to really just, prevent the deaths and the numbers of deaths from exponentially increasing.
So we built the greatest economy in history. We closed it down because of the China plague. When the plague came in, we closed it down, which was very hard psychologically to do. He didn't think we should close it down, and he was wrong. And again, 2 million people would be dead now instead of still 204,000 people is too much. One person is too much. Should have never happened from China. But what happened is we closed it down, and now we're reopening, and we're doing record business. We had 10.4 million people in a 4-month period that we've put back into the workforce. That's a record the likes of which nobody's ever seen before. And he wants to close down he will shut it down again. He will destroy this country. A lot of people, between drugs and alcohol and depression, when you start shutting it down, you take a look at what's happening in some of your Democrat-run states where they have these tough shutdowns. And I'm telling you, it's because they don't want to open it. One of them came out last week. You saw that. Oh, we're going to open up on November 9th. Why November 9th? Because it's after the election. They think they're hurting us by keeping them closed. They're hurting people. People know what to do. They can social distance. They can wash their hands. They can wear masks. They can do whatever they want. But they got to open these states up. When you look at North Carolina, and these governors are under siege, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and a couple of others, you got to open these states up. It's not fair. You're talking about almost it's like being in prison. And you look at what's going on with divorce, look at what's going on with alcoholism and drugs. It's a very, very sad thing. And he'll close down the whole country. This guy will close down the whole country and destroy our country. Our country is coming back incredibly well, setting records as it does it. We don't need somebody to come in and say, let's shut it down.
The plan now and the focus now is on having a vaccine, and Trump says that there will be a vaccine in the new year. He said there might even be a vaccine sooner than the new year. And he also said that we have one of the greatest economies in the history of our country. Whether or not that's true for right now, super questionable, considering that we are in a global pandemic and we are in a recession as well. Millions of Americans are losing their jobs. So many are on unemployment. You've seen the TikToks, guys, of people collecting their unemployment and getting their government aid because of this crisis. And you've seen the funny videos that are trying to make light of this situation. This is no joke, but sometimes we do use humor to cope with it. Chris Wallace brought up a really interesting point that Kamala Harris said. Kamala Harris said, quote, "The public health experts will be muzzled and suppressed, by Trump." That's what she said. And there's a lot of debate going on right now whether or not to trust the scientists, especially when the CDC has gone back and forth about how coronavirus works. Obviously now we have found out more information about coronavirus and who it affects, and that's something that Trump really talked about is, we didn't really know anything about it before, but now that we're dealing with it and we're witnessing everything firsthand, we know that it affects the elderly, and we know all these different things about it that we never knew from the onset. Biden's focus is that we need to reopen schools, but we need to do it safely and effectively. And it's going to cost a lot of money to be able to do it safely and effectively. We need to provide personal protective equipment to teachers. We need to find ways where it's possible to social distance in the classroom. Right now, this is a state of emergency. This is really urgent, and things need to be done. Trump wants to keep the country open, and Biden, obviously we all want to keep the country open, but we also have to prioritize human lives before the economy.
The economy is, I think it's fair to say, recovering faster than expected from the shutdown.
Much faster.
In the second quarter, the unemployment rate fell to 8.4% last month. The Federal Reserve says the hit to growth, which is going to be there, is not going to be nearly as big as they had expected. President Trump, you say we are in a V-shaped recovery. Vice President Biden, you say it's more of a K-shape. What difference does that mean to the American people in terms of the economy?
Let's get into the economy. Chris Wallace talked about something known as a V-shaped versus a K-shaped recovery for the economy. Now, Trump believes that the economy is recovering in a V shape, whereas Biden believes that the economy is recovering in a K shape. So what does this mean? If the economy is recovering, I will explain the difference to you between a V-shaped economic recovery versus a K-shape. Now, I'm going to explain to you the difference between a V-shaped economic recovery versus a K-shaped economic recovery. You might not think this is important because who cares? We just want the economy to recover, right? That's important. But it does matter whether or not it's V-shaped or K-shaped. Trump is saying it's V-shaped, V, which means obviously coronavirus caused the economy to tank and go down, like the beginning of a V, but now it's going back up again. A K-shaped recovery means that the economy went down, and yes, it is going back up. For the wealthy Americans, it is going back up. But for middle class and lower class Americans, it is going down like a K. So you have it going down here because of coronavirus, and then now you have it going up for people who are already privileged and doing very well for themselves, who are profiting off of the stock market, who are profiting off of being able to go and, get out a really low, like the perk is getting a low interest home loan, and those are things that are being done in order to spur the growth of the economy. So a K-shaped means that the wealthy Americans are having a really easy time right now. Their money just keeps going up, 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 and working Americans, middle class Americans are having a really difficult time. Things are going down, 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 down. And it's also difficult to find a job during a pandemic. Everybody has a different capacity of what they can do. Some people can't even go into work because they don't want to risk getting an elderly family member sick or someone who is immunocompromised as it is sick. So they're always going to value human life and health over a job. But both of those things are so intertwined, because in order to survive, you need money, and it's a basic, means to an end, to support your family, to be comfortable in life, and the economy is important, and each thing affects the other. So keep in mind that both the economy and coronavirus are huge, huge issues in determining the outcome of this election. In this debate, coronavirus was talked about for a huge chunk of the time. It was a 2-hour debate, and I would say that coronavirus and the economy took up at least an hour of the debate. It took up such a huge chunk of time. Like I said, those are the two things that are affecting all Americans, is the pandemic and the economy. Trump made a really interesting point where he said that shutting down the government is causing a lot of problems, not just economically, but people are suffering. We all know how hard it is to live during a shutdown. He didn't provide evidence for this, but he did mention how a shut down government will lead to alcoholism, divorces, people are fighting because they're in close proximity with each other all the time. Life is changing rapidly. It's an uncertain time. It creates fear, it creates restlessness, it creates irritability. And Trump touched on that, but he didn't provide any sort of stats or numbers. He kind of just threw out this notion that there's alcoholism and there are divorces, which I don't doubt, but we also have to take into consideration what Biden said about all of this. So let's get into that.
We're now moved to you. As I said, posing the question, the president says it's a V-shaped recovery. You say it's a K-shaped recovery. What's the difference?
The difference is millionaires and billionaires like him in the middle of the COVID crisis have done very well. Billionaires have made another $300 billion because of his profligate tax proposal, and he only focused on the market. But you folks at home, you folks living in Scranton and Claymont and all the small towns and working class towns in America, how well are you doing? This guy paid a total of $750 in taxes.
Sir, it's his wrong statement. Yeah, I understand. You've agreed to the 2 minutes, so please let him have it.
Do I get my time back? The fact is that he has, in fact, worked on this in a way that he's going to be the first president of the United States to leave office having fewer jobs in his administration than when he became president. Fewer jobs than when he became president. First one in American history. Secondly, the people who have lost their jobs are those people who have been on the front lines, those people who have been saving our lives, those people who have been out there dying, people who've been putting themselves in the way to make sure that we could all try to make it. And the idea that he is insisting that we go forward and open when you have almost half the states in America with a significant increase in COVID deaths and COVID cases in the United States of America. And he wants to open it up more. Why does he want to open it up? Why doesn't he take care of the American? You can't fix the economy until you fix the COVID crisis. And he has no intention of doing anything about making it better for you all at home in terms of your health and your safety. Schools. Why aren't schools open? Because it costs a lot of money to open them safely. You know, they were going to give, his administration was going to give the teachers and school students masks. And then they decided, no, couldn't do that because it's not a national emergency. Not a national emergency. They've done nothing to help small businesses. Nothing. They're closing. 1 in 6 is now gone. He ought to get on the job and take care of the needs of the American people so we can open safely.
Biden talks about how opening up the economy is going to hurt Americans. And he makes a very, very clear point that you can't fix the economy until you fix the COVID crisis. I mean, COVID is affecting all of our lives. The economy is not going to be good so long as COVID is going on alive and well, unless we find ways to cope with the current crisis and figure out a way to safely operate businesses, safely operate social hangouts. And we all know that not every single American is abiding by the rules of staying at home and quarantining. There's only so long you can do that for, and a lot of Americans are still going out even for non-essential items. They're not just going out to grocery stores. The clubs are opening up again, restaurants are open again. A lot of Americans are going about their business like COVID does not exist, and that is scary for the millions of Americans who have pre-existing conditions, health issues, the elderly. So many people have died because of COVID, and imagine not being able to say goodbye to a loved one because you're not allowed in the hospital room. You have to literally communicate with them via FaceTime or, some sort of technology. And it's really affecting the way that we live our lives, and all we can hope is that this crisis ends, but we need to make sure that we have the leadership and we elect the right person to get the job done, which is why we're talking about the issues now and what each candidate is going to do.
In regard to more divided, the nation can't stay divided. We can't be this way. And speaking of my son, the way you talk about the military, the way you talk about them being losers and being and just being suckers. My son was in Iraq. He spent a year there. He got the Bronze Star. He got the Conspicuous Service Medal. He was not a loser. He was a patriot, and the people left behind there were heroes.
Really?
And I resent.
Are you talking
like
about
hell.
Hunter? Are you talking about
I'm
Hunter?
talking about my son, Beau Biden. You're talking about.
I don't know Beau. I know Hunter.
Yeah,
Hunter got thrown out of the military. He was thrown out, dishonorably discharged.
That's not true. He wasn't dishonorably.
Cocaine use. And he didn't have a job until you became vice president. And once you became vice president, he made a fortune in Ukraine, in China, in Moscow,
that is simply
and various
not
other places.
True.
He
my
made
son,
a fortune.
My son.
And he didn't have a job.
My son, like a lot of people we know at home, had a drug problem. He's overtaken it. He's fixed it. He's worked on it, and I'm proud of him.
But why was he given tens of millions of dollars?
But he wasn't given tens of millions of dollars. That is totally discredited.
We've already been through.
Totally discredited.
We've already been through this. I think the American people would rather hear about more substantial subjects. Well, as the moderator, sir, I'm going to make a judgment call here.
$3.5 million.
I will mention that things did get really dicey when Trump started talking about Biden's family, and things also got dicey when Biden started talking about Trump's tax returns. I mean, we know that Trump paid $750 in income tax, and that is way less than what several thousand working Americans are paying right now. Teachers are paying more than that. Blue-collar workers are paying more than that. I mean, we have so many people who are paying way more in income tax than the president himself. And this is the guy who's responsible for running our country and looking out for our best interests. I don't feel like that's being done right now, because you not paying taxes might make you a smart businessman, but it makes you a really stupid president. Let's be real. You have a responsibility to pay your taxes, and looking for loopholes to avoid paying those taxes means that you're not helping the very people you chose to represent when you ran for president. I do love what Biden said when Biden mentioned this is not about his family or my family, this is about your family. And he goes on to discuss something really moving and really sad and depressing. And he says, how many of you guys woke up and saw an empty chair in your living room or kitchen? And Trump just interrupts him, kind of like kills the efficacy of that statement by interrupting him and saying it would have been way worse with you, it would have been more deaths, it would have been this, it would have been that. So there is constant interruption. There wasn't really fair play, and like Chris Wallace said, both candidates agreed to uninterrupted speaking time for 2 minutes each. Now let's move on and talk about racial issues in this country. When you state and recite the Pledge of Allegiance, the end of that entire paragraph is with liberty and justice for all. Right now there is a huge debate in our country whether or not there is equality. We all know that there is systemic injustice. Some people decide to look that in the eye and acknowledge it, whereas some people decide that it doesn't exist. Biden named all the problematic things that he could think of regarding the Trump administration, and he went on to say that Trump had military use tear gas against the George Floyd protesters who were protesting outside the White House. He says that Trump wants to divide people, not unite people. And he kept emphasizing the racist division in this country as a result of the Trump administration. He also went on to explain that 1 out of 1,000 African Americans have been killed because of coronavirus, and that number might become even larger with an estimated report of 1 out of 500 African Americans dying of coronavirus if this is not treated seriously.
These cops aren't happy to see what happened to George Floyd. These cops aren't happy to see what happened to Breonna Taylor. Most don't like it, but we have to have a system where people are held accountable. And by the way, violence in response is never appropriate. Never appropriate. Peaceful protest is. Violence is never appropriate.
All right.
What is peaceful protest? When they run through the middle of the town and burn down your stores and kill people all over the place, and you say peaceful protest? No, it's not, but you say it is.
In regards to the Breonna Taylor case, Chris Wallace asked if justice could be applied equally in this country. Now, this is a huge issue we all need to face head on. The Black Lives Matter movement has taken on full storm, especially during the pandemic. Biden stated that there is systemic injustice in this country. However, when it came to an action plan about how to move forward with things, Trump talked about how Biden couldn't even use the word law enforcement or else he'd lose the far left. Trump kept interrupting Biden throughout the debate, saying that Biden was losing or would lose the far left by the statements that he was making. However, a lot of Democrats already know that Biden was never far left to begin with. So if the far left isn't going to vote for Biden and they don't like Biden, they're not going to vote for Trump either. It's just basic voting theory that if you don't like what Biden has to say, voting for Trump is way, way worse if you are a left-wing Democrat, which means that by default, you need to vote for someone that is more in line with your views than more not in line with your views, because one is actually destructive, whereas the other isn't fully what you want, but it is the best alternative to what you want. A lot of Republicans are also disappointed in Trump. They are disappointed in how aggressive he was and how unpresidential he was. Now, when it comes to the issue of race, Biden talked about law enforcement by stating that there are a few bad apples in law enforcement, and by further claiming that his goal wasn't to defund the police, but rather to reconstruct the police.
This month, your administration directed federal agencies to end racial sensitivity training that addresses white privilege or critical race theory. Why did you decide to do that, to end racial sensitivity training? And do you believe that there is systemic racism in this country, sir?
I ended it because it's racist. I ended it because a lot of people were complaining that they were asked to do things that were absolutely insane, that it was a radical revolution that was taking place in our military, in our schools, all over the place, and you know it, and so does everybody else. And he would know.
What is radical about racial sensitivity training, sir?
If you were a certain person, you had no status in life. It was sort of a reversal. And if you look at the people, we were paying people hundreds of thousands of dollars to teach very bad ideas and, frankly, very sick ideas. And really, they were teaching people to hate our country. And I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to allow that to happen.
There was another issue brought up when it came to race about racial sensitivity training. Trump ended racial sensitivity training, and he didn't really have a clear or concise answer as to why he did it. He just said that racial sensitivity training was ruining the country and that it was racist. And when asked why it was so radical by Chris Wallace, Trump replied, "I don't want people to hate our country. I don't want people thinking that America is this racist, awful, crazy place." But that has nothing to do with racial sensitivity training. Biden responded that racial sensitivity training is important because even though you might not mean to hurt someone else's feelings, it's important to know what does hurt someone else's feelings. And we'll never know what hurts someone else's feelings without that conversation being open. Racial sensitivity training teaches you what you can and cannot say, what is kind and courteous, and what is downright racist or a microaggression. Racial sensitivity, according to Biden, is important because we really need to be empathetic and understand how other people may feel, especially people that don't look like us, especially people that have different experiences from us. Trump kept bringing back the issue of race to law and order and talking about how Biden may or may not side with law and order. Biden responded that he believes in the law. And instead of mentioning the words verbatim, law and order, Biden used the wording law with justice, which is different from law and order. It has a different connotation. It means fairness, equity, equality. Law with justice. The reason that I think that was a very powerful statement, law with justice is a huge difference from saying law and order. It may sound the same, but law and order isn't always just. As we know, the law hasn't always been a great indicator of morality. At one point in human history, people were legally allowed to own slaves. So the law has not always been just. So I truly do appreciate that Biden made a point to say law with justice as opposed to law and order. Totally different connotation, totally different meaning when you really think about it.
Vice President, you go first.
Prepared to let people vote. They should go to iwillvote.com. Decide how they're going to vote, when they're going to vote, and what means by which they're going to vote. His own Homeland Security Director, and as well as the FBI Director, says there is no evidence at all that mail-in ballots are a source of being manipulated and cheating. They said that. The fact is that there are going to be millions of people because of COVID that are going to be voting by mail-in ballots, like he does, by the way. He sits behind the Resolute desk and sends his ballot to Florida, number one. Number two, we're going to make sure that those people who want to vote in person are able to vote because enough poll watchers are there to make sure they can socially distance. The polls are open on time, and the polls stay open until the votes are counted. And this is all about trying to dissuade people from voting because he's trying to scare people into thinking that it's not going to be legitimate. Show up and vote. You will determine the outcome of this election. Vote, vote, vote. If you're able to vote early in your state, vote early. If you're able to vote in person, vote in person. Vote whatever way is the best way for you, because he cannot stop you from being able to determine the outcome of this election. And in terms of whether or not when the votes are counted, and they're all counted, that will be accepted. If I win, that will be accepted. If I lose, that'll be accepted. But by the way, if in fact he says he's not sure what he's going to accept, well, let me tell you something. It doesn't matter, because if we get the votes, it's going to be all over. He's going to go. He can't stay in power. It won't happen. It won't happen. So vote. Just make sure you understand you have it in your control to determine what this country is going to look like the next 4 years. Is it going to change, or are you going to get 4 more years of these lies?
Chris Wallace asked both candidates, why should we vote for you over your opponents? Totally legitimate question. This is where each candidate has the opportunity to really sell themselves and destroy their opponent should they choose to. Trump stated that he has done more in 47 months than Biden has done in 47 years. He also said that there was that huge impeachment hoax, and then he mentioned something about Hillary that didn't really make sense, but he just threw in her name, and obviously that's going to ignite his following. He talked about how he had the greatest economy, and COVID kind of ruined that, but we're going back up again, and he reassured us that we're going back up again. He also said that he's responsible for rebuilding the military, the Space Force, and for fixing the VA. Right now, there is a 91% approval rating in the VA, according to Donald Trump?
Under this president, we become weaker, sicker, poorer, more divided, and more violent. When I was vice president, we inherited a recession. I was asked to fix it. I did. We left him a booming economy, and he caused a recession. With regard to being weaker, the fact is that I've gone head-to-head with Putin and made it clear to him we're not going to take any of his stuff. He's Putin's puppy. He still refuses to even say anything to Putin about the bounty on the heads of American soldiers.
Biden also called Trump Putin's puppy, and he emphasized that he himself went head-to-head with Putin, unlike Trump, who is Putin's puppy, aka puppet, whatever you want to call it. I'm surprised at this point that he didn't just call him Putin's bitch, because at this point there are no rules to the debate and people are just saying whatever they want, whether that's shut up or you're not smart or whatever it is. So many ad hominem attacks throughout the entire debates. Our mission is not to pass judgment on Trump's family or Biden's family. Why should we even care? This is not a reality show. This is way more than that. This is the fate of our nation as we know it. Our mission objective should be to determine which candidates' policies align with our ideas of what will help this country. Biden's policies or Trump's policies? In addition to policies, who can we trust to deliver those promises? Trump or Biden? We have the benefit of knowing that Trump has been in office for 3.5 years, and we have the ability to fact check what he's delivered on and what he has not delivered on. We also have the ability to see what Biden accomplished during his time as both a senator and vice president during the Obama administration. We have all the facts and tools at our fingertips. We have the miracle of the internet, the miracle of Google. Please don't just listen to me or what the media says or what your friend says. Do your own research and figure out what your belief system is and who best aligns with your belief system. I also want you to really think about the fate of our nation. If you were a minority in this country, how would you want to be treated? If white people became the minority in this country, how would they want to be treated? If rich people became poor in this country, how would they want to be treated? It's really easy to vote for what helps our best interest when we think we're always going to be at the top and we have little empathy for those that are struggling. So I urge you to think about how would you want to be treated if you were the other side? What would you want? And what is your vision, not just for yourself and not just for your family, but for our country and for the world? Think about these things and please make sure to vote this coming election. It matters now more than ever before. Millions of people this year are going to be voting from mail-in ballots, and the goal is to make sure for the people who want to go in person that the polls are safe, people are social distanced, and everything is operating safely under COVID. All reasonable requests. But the main thing that Biden is emphasizing is to vote, 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 and vote. So please, everybody, whether or not you're voting for Trump or Biden, is your opinion, is your prerogative, is your First Amendment right to express who you like more, who you think will do a greater job. But please vote so that we can ensure that the person who gets elected is who the people want to get elected, because we live in a democracy and it's important that the person chosen reflects what the people want. Thanks so much for listening, and if you have any questions, make sure to do your research first. Go to multiple sources. I'm your host, Mina Naidine, and it's been real.